Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, so many. I hope we have chairs for everyone. And Alexander will talk about Russian Ark and we'll watch the film. I will give him the mic.
Dear friends, the topic of today's program, the film Russian Ark, released in 2002, is a Russian-German co-production shot on a single day, in a single shot, unedited shot, in Petersburg, in a single building. The film was released at the Cannes Festival in 2002. It enjoyed multiple nominations at Cannes and other festivals in Europe, but won no awards. And in general, the European critics, at least at that time, their reaction was rather tepid. But across the Atlantic, however, the reaction was very enthusiastic. And it was shown and received award at the Toronto International Film Festival, and also received some awards in San Francisco and Argentina. The director of the film, Alexander Sokurov, is a remarkable figure in many respects. He was born in 1951 in a small place in Siberia, studied history at the university, and his passion already at the university was cinematography, so he made it to the topmost cinematographic school of the country, the All-Union Gerasimov Institute of Cinematography in Moscow in 1975. It was the year after Andrei Tarkovsky film Mirror was released, and Sokurov knew Tarkovsky personally, and he admitted that Mirror impressed him and influenced him very much. He started directing and making his own TV programs already at the age of 19, small television films, live recordings, sports events, coverage. He graduated in 1979, completing not the 5-year standard course, but 4 years. And it was not because he was an excellent student, but because the administration of the institute was uncomfortable with his ideology, and he was sort of made graduate 1 year earlier. His first feature, which was his graduation work, actually was destroyed at the orders of the administration of the institute. He was accused of formalism and the overall anti-Soviet tone of his work, but someone preserved the copy of that film, so the film survived. I chose this particular image of young Tarkovsky, young Sokurov at the very beginning of his career in cinema. His hairstyle and mustache style are recognizably 70s. So those of you who remember how Andrei Tarkovsky looked, so the looks here are very similar. Since he graduated with a scandal, he could not get a place at the topmost studio of the country, Moscow Film. Instead, he moved to Leningrad, the Soviet name of Petersburg, and joined the studio there. He shot several features in Leningrad, which were never shown. They were not allowed to run in the cinema halls of the country. His career was going nowhere, and Tarkovsky, who continued to stay in touch with him even after his self-imposed exile to Europe, several times arranged Sokurov's leaving the country and joining him in Europe. each time Sokurov refused, and interestingly, his reasons for refusal were that he didn't want to be disconnected from the Russian language, and he didn't want to leave Petersburg and its major museum, the Hermitage, which we are going to see shortly. But everything changed in the late 80s with the policy of Gorbachev's opening up. He was allowed to travel abroad. His films were very well received at the international festivals. He was allowed to represent his country at the international festivals, and he did it with great success. It was in the 90s, and particularly in the 2000s, that Alexander Sokurov got a worldwide recognition. The European Film Academy included his name in the 100 best directors of the world cinema list in '95. 4 of his films were released at the Cannes Film Festival. He became the regular participant of prestigious cinema festivals. He won 43 nominations and 26 awards. And some of his films with their international titles can be seen here. So maybe if Aurofilm decides, we could explore some of other films by Alexander Sokurov in future. One of his landmark works is Faust, which was released in 2011, based on the eponymous tragedy of the German poet Goethe. It's the timeless story of an intellectual and scholar who is passionately in love with a woman much younger to him, Margarita, and he is prepared to wager everything, even his own soul, to get her. So here we see Sokurov's vision of this middle-aged scholar who is prepared to enter the deal with the devil only to get what his heart desires. A middle-aged introvert who asks deep questions and receives no answers. Faust is set in the early 19th century, and the language of this feature was German. One of the international critics called it odd, dense, and bizarre. And this illustration hopefully explains, if not dense, then why it is odd and bizarre. This is the Sokurov's vision of Mephistopheles, the Satan, the tempter of Dr. Faust, played by a Russian actor, extremely disgusting character looking like hyena. The film enjoyed enormous success. It received the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Festival, where it was released in 2011 itself. And the head of jury at the Venice Film Festival at the time, the American director Darren Aronofsky, said about it, "It is a film that changes the life of everyone who happens to see it." One of his most renowned works is his exploration of the 20th century dictators in 3 installments. Moloch, 1999, about Hitler. Taurus, in 2001, about Lenin. And The Sun, 2005, about the Japanese Emperor Hirohito. It's the so-called Power Trilogy, which is meant to explore the corrupting effects of absolute power. The choice of characters of this trilogy is in itself interesting. Hitler, Lenin, and Hirohito. In a way, they cover the entire world. Hitler, the West, Lenin, Russia, and Hirohito, the East. And later on, Sokurov added Faust to this trilogy, making it a tetralogy. Very strange decision, but anyway, Faust in a way also explores the effects of power, the destructive effects of power. I've chosen this image from the sun depicting the Emperor Hirohito because it wonderfully captures the fundamental loneliness of dictators, especially if they happen to be royals. Dictators, just like royals, have no peers, and very often they're fundamentally alone because of their constant paranoia and constant suspicion. So that shot captures it. And this is another very interesting shot, again from the sun, showing Hirohito taken into custody by the Allied soldiers, and very interesting contrast between his short stature as a physical body and his erstwhile gigantic political stature as the crowned head of the Japanese empire that spread from the Aleutian Islands to Australia, and from India to Hawaii, if we take everything, including the Japanese attacks. The topic of today's program is Russian Ark. It's one of Alexander Sokurov's iconic works, and I've chosen a Japanese poster. I could have chosen many other posters because it's an internationally known feature. I've chosen the Japanese poster to really demonstrate to you the global scale of Sokurov's recognition. The film Russian Ark is shot entirely in the Winter Palace in Petersburg. So this is the Winter Palace. Actually, it's a gigantic building, and it's the biggest building of the Hermitage Museum. The Hermitage also consists of this small building called Small Hermitage, Old Hermitage, and New Hermitage. So it's pretty something, you know, if we keep in mind that the buildings are also quite deep. They extend in that direction. So it was shot in a single unedited shot as a walk through several halls of this gigantic building, and it took 4 takes and involved an astounding number of extras. And it's only on the 4th take that the director was satisfied and everything went well. So basically, it's like minimum of rehearsing, and 4 takes is actually not a very big number, if we think about it. So this Winter Palace, which we have just seen from the outside and which we are going to see from inside very shortly, the present building was constructed by Francesco Bartolomeo Rastrelli. So of all the architects that created Petersburg, which is informally known as Northern Venice or Northern Palmyra, Italian architects probably contributed the most. And among all the Italian architects who lived and worked in Petersburg, Rastrelli is perhaps the biggest name. He arrived in Russia as a youth at the age of 17. He spent his entire life in Russia in the royal service, and Petersburg was his main karmabhumi. He constructed 2 gigantic palaces there, and at present his work spans 3 post-Soviet states. It's the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Latvia. In each of those places we can see some of his palaces, even today. For 30 years, the Winter Palace served as one of the two official residences of the remarkable Russian empress of the German origin, Catherine the Great or Catherine II. And it is Catherine II, Catherine the Great, who started building the collection of what is known today as the Hermitage Museum. So she sent agents to Europe who started scouring the European art market. We are talking about 60s, 70s, 80s of the 18th century, and the scale of her acquisitions was gigantic. We are talking about hundreds upon hundreds of paintings that she brought to Russia. Among them, real masterpieces like works by Rembrandt, Titian, Raphael, Rubens, Van Dyck, etc., etc., etc. And the museum was officially opened in 1852. It gradually grew. The collections were enlarged continuously. Every successive Russian emperor would add something. For instance, Catherine the Great's grandson, Alexander, who was instrumental in defeating Napoleon, he in fact came to acquire the art collection of Napoleon's widow, Josephine. And he brought it all the way to Petersburg. And it continued that way. And after the revolution, the new Bolshevik government implemented the policy of art requisition from the private collections. So enormous number of art pieces were taken away from the palaces of aristocracy, which was either exiled or dead, and sent to mainly this museum. So what is this film about? It is a walk through 33 halls of the Winter Palace in Petersburg, some of the halls very big, and we have the narrator, whom we never see. We see everything through his eyes. We just hear his voice. And by the way, it's the voice-over of the director himself, Alexander Sokurov. Somehow, this narrator discovers that he is dead, and he is in the afterlife. And he miraculously finds himself in the Winter Palace. He starts walking through it, observing what is going on, observing the people around him, the people belonging to different eras of Russian history. And he does it in the company of a stranger, a European aristocrat, a retired diplomat, who is modeled on the Frenchman, Marquis de Custine, whom you can see here. So Marquis de Custine was a real historical character who happened to travel in 1839 to Russia and left a collection of essays about what he saw. In the English translation, in its Penguin title, it is Letters from Russia. They recorded his extremely negative view of what he saw and experienced. So he saw the place as malmanaged, barbaric, and not just the common people, but aristocracy and even royalty in Russia. They're basically Asian, they just have the veneer of European culture, and in short, everything is bad. And the Russophobic circles in Europe very much praised this work. The work became a slap in the face of the Russian royalty and aristocracy of that time, and on the contrary was received very positively by the Russian left, by the revolutionaries, who said, oh yeah, we've been telling you all the way, all along, that in reality you are underdeveloped, you are falling behind, and now even the foreigners can see it and whatnot. So Marquis de Custine is wonderfully played by the unfortunately late Russian actor Sergei Dryden. So this is already a shot from the film. So once again, Marquis, or this European anonymous traveler, and the narrator can see each other, but the public, all those hundreds of people around, they cannot see the narrator. So they keep walking together, exchanging remarks, and observing the vignettes of the 300 years of the Russian history in those 33 halls of the Winter Palace. But not everything is hunky-dory. Our European guest, even though he's walking through the best and most opulent palace in the Russian Empire, even though he is very often awed by its opulence, its Baroque opulence, and the richness of its art collections, of which he recognizes many pieces, he's constantly peeved. He says, all your emperors are tyrants. You can't make good musicians. In fact, your music gives me rashes. You can't even make a proper display of the paintings you have acquired from Europe. You have no taste. Your artists are good for nothing. They can only copy us. So it continues like that, and this kind of remarks elicits response from the narrator, who is Russian and who has very deep connection to his country, to his culture, and to this place. And these dialogues are extremely short, but they're extremely important. They're very profound. So, and basically, through these short exchanges, the main point of this film is brought in. What is Russian identity? Is Russia Europe or not? Is Russia West or East? It's been a very vexed academic debate, which has been sometimes unnecessarily politicized, and it continues even today, and it always has a spillover into politics and whatnot. So we are going to see, or rather feel, what Sokurov thinks about it. And so here we see our European guest in Raphael's Loggia, the copy of the Raphael's Loggia in Rome, the exact copy. And he visited Rome, and he says, wonderful, it's a beautiful place. And interestingly, I would like to draw your attention to this character. This is a spy who is watching the European guest, and he will keep appearing throughout the film, trying to disguise himself somehow, but basically he is after the guest, he's watching him, and please remember him. He would appear several times, and his extremely white gloves. So who are we going to see on this journey? At the very beginning, we see Peter the First, or Peter the Great, who built the city of Petersburg and who had his first residence in the Winter Palace. So what we see here is the ceremonial portrait of this monarch, the Tsar of Russia, who announced himself as an emperor, who enlarged the empire, who westernized the country, who wanted to have a new capital, and in fact wanted it to be like Venice with lots of water. Thank God it didn't happen. It's very cold. Having a lot of cold water around you is no fun. But anyway, but we are going to see him in a very, very different light. So we are not going to see him as a towering historic personality. We will see him administering a physical correction to one of his courtiers. So in very domestic setup. So he was very simple in his daily life, and we are going to see shortly that he's not wearing any special clothes, and he beats up the courtier most probably for some corruption, which he routinely did because he could not stand corruption, and he administered that correction very often even to his closest associates. Then we are going to see Catherine the Great herself supervising the rehearsals in the Hermitage Chamber Theatre. Historians very often describe her as an enlightened despot. So she was very much for stability in the 18th century meaning of this word. She enslaved up to 1 million of her subjects, distributing them as serfs to her favorites. But he also presided over the rapidly expanding empire, which became a cultural hub of sorts. She encouraged arts and sciences. She was in correspondence with Voltaire, probably the biggest representative of French Enlightenment, and she received another representative of French Enlightenment, Denis Diderot, and she received him exactly in the Winter Palace, which we are going to see, and conducted several conversations with him. We are also going to see Nicholas I, who ruled over Russia for 30 years, 1825 to 1855. To the European audience, he would probably be known as for his very reactionary, anti-revolutionary stance. He helped to suppress the Hungarian Revolution of 1848, and he also faced the European powers, Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire during the Crimean War, which sadly for him he lost. And because of this, because of Crimean War, there is the Sevastopol Boulevard in Paris, and the English would probably remember the Crimean War for the disastrous charge of the Light Brigade at the Battle of Balaclava. So we are going to see him along with, this is again shot from the film, along with his empress, a Prussian princess, not seen in this shot. We are going to see him receiving apologies from the envoy of Iran for the murder of the Russian embassy staff in 1829. And it takes place in it's a splendid ceremony, and we see the grandson of the Shah of Iran reading out the apology letter and saying, no, please forgive us, we didn't mean that. And along with the apologies, by the way, the Shah of Iran presented the emperor with the most valuable crown jewel Iran had, the Shah diamond. And interestingly, since we are on Indian soil, it's worthy of mentioning that the Shah diamond was actually mined in the mines of Golconda, and later on it belonged to the Mughals, and when Nadir Shah sacked Delhi, he took the Shah diamond to Iran, and that's how the Iranian dynasty came to acquire it. We are also going to see in a very informal scene the last royal occupants of the Winter Palace, Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, his spouse Alex of Hesse, and their children, the 4 princesses and Prince Alexis. So they will be shown in a very informal setting, having breakfast. And we will also see the empress accompanied by a nun, who is actually her elder sister, also a princess of Hesse, who was also married to the Romanov family, and who renounced the world, became an Orthodox Russian nun after her royal husband was assassinated by the Russian revolutionaries. So we will see them walking through the gallery, and the nun would give religious instruction to the empress, who was actually very religious. We are also going to see the present director of the Hermitage Museum, Mikhail Piotrovsky, who is shown here on the left, a PhD in the Arabic language, who has been the director of the Hermitage Museum, one of the biggest art collections in the world, since 1992. So it's been already 30 years that he's been directing this museum. Here he is shown giving an interview to the mass media in Palmyra, that has been just liberated from the Islamic State militants in 2016. And the scene where he would appear is very interesting. Somehow, miraculously, his father, Boris Piotrovsky, also a professor and academician, Orientalist, who used to be the director of the Hermitage Museum before him, and one of the predecessors, academician Auroville, another Orientalist. Somehow miraculously they came from the afterlife to talk to the present director of the museum and encourage him in his cultural work. So between themselves, these three gentlemen had 70 years, if not 80, of running the topmost cultural institution of the country, one of the biggest art treasuries of the world, including during the time of Stalin's terror, and then World War II, and then the political stagnation of the 60s, 70s. It is not exactly an easy task. We are also going to see Alexander Pushkin with his wife. He will come in a cameo. He's not going to speak. We will see him several times. And this is exactly how he is going to look. Actually, this painting was completed decades before the film was released. But it captures somehow, probably even the Pushkin's appearance in this film is based on this painting, because very similar costume, and this is also this also seems to be a ball somewhere, and we will see him at the ball. So the greatest Russian poet, known for his lyrics, love poetry, and also for his poetic novel Eugene Onegin, which has also been made into a film. So we will see him searching for his wife, or running after her. They're probably having a difficult moment, and this becomes a precursor to the sad end of Pushkin's life, because it happened so that he had to defend the honor of his wife. So he had to face the son of the French ambassador in duel, and he lost this duel and died in a lot of pain 3 days later. We are also going to see a very interesting character, but not directly. Valery Gergiev, the director of the world-renowned Mariinsky Theater in Petersburg, and a renowned orchestra conductor. So the film will close with a gigantic ball scene with hundreds of extras, and with the orchestra playing away, and he is going to conduct this orchestra. We will not see him up close, but he is very much there. So this is again the very end of the film, the scene which was probably very difficult to choreograph. It involved hundreds of extras with continuously moving camera, dozens of dancing pairs, lots of people milling around in the 19th century costumes, actually different times of the 19th century, all of them dressed to kill. The film we are going to see is very difficult to categorize as a feature film or a documentary. It is both and it is neither. So I don't even know which genre it belongs to formally. And it comes as no surprise. So the director is known for his boldness, and he also has under his belt 36 or so documentaries that he made apart from his feature films throughout his career. So it should come as no surprise. And the film is unique in many respects, in its technical aspects, in its content, even if we consider the entire creative oeuvre of this director, Alexander Sokurov. So on this I will end, will not torture you anymore, and this speaker as well as the director would like to thank you for your kind attention. Films by Alexander Sokurov are never really easy to watch. They do feel very long, and even though it is just 1.5 hours, it feels much longer because it's a single shot. And the closing credits are also extremely long because the number of actors and dancers and extras, it goes up to a whopping 2,000 people, plus the gigantic crew that was involved in preparing them, doing makeup and helping with costumes and whatnot, and choreographers. That's why the closing credits were so embarrassingly long. So thank you for your patience. And, well, I don't know, we can go into some discussion if you feel like, but I feel a bit hesitant because it's been quite something. It's been a bit long, I guess. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for coming.